You failed the only test that mattered. The elderly woman's voice trembled as she said it. Her shoulders slumped. Her coat thin against the winter air drifting in from the open doors. Nurses and visitors turned to look. Some whispered. Others stared in silence. Across from her stood a young nurse named Alina Hart. Her uniform was simple. Her hair pulled back into a tight braid, her face pale from a long shift. She looked small in that bright hallway. Small, but steady. She did not argue. Asterisk. She did not raise her voice. She simply looked at the older woman with eyes that had seen far more pain than anyone in that room could guess. Alina had always known. Life has a climb. She grew up in a modest foster home on the edge of a small town. The air there always smelled of laundry soap and old wood. Winters were cold. Summers were loud with crickets and distant traffic. She never knew her real parents. The only thing left with her at the orphanage was a small silver locket shaped like a sun. It had no picture inside. It's just an empty space. As a child, she would hold it at night, pressing the cool metal against her chest, wondering who had once held her, wondering why they let her go. But she never let bitterness take root. She worked hard. She studied by dim lamplight. She earned a scholarship. She became a nurse because she believed pain should be met with kindness. At 26, she was known in the hospital as the quiet one asterisk, the nurse who stayed late, the one who sat beside patients long after her shift ended, the one who held hands when families could not be there. She carried her exhaustion like armor. That morning, an older couple had arrived in the emergency wing. Their clothes were clean but worn. The man leaned heavily on a cane. The woman's hand shook as she filled out paperwork. Said they had no insurance, no savings. Nearby, the front desk clerk sighed. There were rules, policies, limits. Alina watched from the nurse's station. She saw the embarrassment in the woman's eyes, the quiet pride in the man's stiff posture. When their voices grew tense, Alina stepped forward. She spoke gently. She told the clerk to bill the care under a hardship program. She promised to help them apply for financial support. The clerk frowned asterisk. That program was limited. It required proof. Alina did not argue loudly. She simply said that if someone is in pain, paperwork can wait. The hallway had grown quiet. Some staff exchanged looks. Others looked away. The older woman's eyes filled with tears as Alina helped her husband into a wheelchair. That was when the words came. You failed the only test that mattered. The statement made no sense. Alina blinked, confused. She searched the woman's face for anger, for mockery. But what she saw instead was heartbreak. Behind the older couple's tired appearance was something else. Something hidden in the way they carried themselves. Something too composed for desperation. Unknown to everyone in that hallway, Richard and Margaret Lawson were among the wealthiest families in the state. Their name was carved into buildings, printed in newspapers, spoken in boardrooms. And years ago they had lost their only daughter, a child taken from a hospital nursery during a chaotic storm. A mistake never corrected. A trail that went cold, asterisk for decades they searched quietly. DNA databases, private investigators, old records, till one fragile clue surfaced. A nurse named Alina Hart. Same birth date, same city. Same hospital. The resemblance was faint, but present in the eyes. But they did not want to claim her through documents alone. They needed to know her heart, so they came dressed as strangers, as people with nothing. Alina had chosen compassion without knowing who they were. But Margaret's trembling words were not condemnation. They were grief wrapped in shock. Alina stood still, her heart racing. She felt exposed, though she did not know why. Around them, the silence grew heavy. The front desk clerk crossed her arms, sensing tension. Asterisk, a security guard shifted his weight. Richard Lawson slowly reached into his worn coat pocket. He pulled out a thin envelope. Inside were DNA results, birth records, photographs of a baby with the same small crescent mark behind the left ear, same mark Alina had hidden beneath her hair her whole life. The hallway seemed to tilt. Margaret stepped closer, her voice breaking, her eyes searching Alina's face as if memorizing it. We did not lose you because you were unwanted. We lost you because we were helpless. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced through years of emptiness. Nights of wondering. The weight of a locket with no picture. Richard's hand trembled as he revealed the silver twin to her own locket. The other half of the sun. The metal pieces fit perfectly together. Gasps rippled through the hallway. Asterisk, the clerk who had doubted them now, stared in stunned silence. But the true shift did not come from the papers. It came from Elena's quiet strength. She had already proven who she was. She had chosen kindness. When no one was watching, Richard looked at her with tears in his eyes and said softly that wealth can build walls, but character builds a soul. Margaret added that true honor is what you do when the world believes you are small. Elena felt something inside her settle. Not anger, not triumph. Just a deep, steady warmth. For years she had believed she was alone. Now she saw that her compassion had not grown from emptiness. It had grown from something deeper, from blood that carried both resilience and grace. The hospital staff slowly stepped back, giving them space. But one more truth lingered. Margaret's first words still echoed. Asterisk. You failed the only test that mattered. Elena looked at her gently. Margaret explained through tears that the test was not about wealth. It was about whether their daughter had grown with bitterness or mercy. Whether loss had hardened her or shaped her into light. Or Elena had passed. She had passed long before she knew she was being watched. In that moment, the hallway shifted from suspicion to respect. Doctors who once rushed past now paused. Nurses who barely spoke now stood taller. The security guard removed his cap. Richard straightened his back and made a quiet phone call. Within minutes, hospital executives arrived. They had recognized the Lawson name. Asterisk, there was no shouting, no revenge. Only calm statements. The hardship program would be expanded. Would be secured. No patient in that wing would be turned away for lack of money again. It's not because of pressure, but because Elena's quiet stand had exposed a weakness in the system. The executives nodded, humbled. Margaret turned to the clerk and said softly that policies should protect dignity, not replace it. The clerk's face flushed red. She lowered her gaze. Elena did not gloat. She did not say, "I told you so." She simply returned to the patient she had been tending before the confrontation began. An elderly man waiting alone in a small room. As she adjusted his blanket, she felt Richard and Margaret watching her, not as benefactors, not as judges, but as parents seeing their daughter's strength for the first time. Later that evening, the hospital lobby filled quietly. Asterisk. Word had spread. Staff gathered in respectful silence as the Lawson family formally introduced Elena as their daughter. There were no flashing lights, no loud applause, just a slow wave of people standing in quiet honor. Elena stood between the two worlds she had known. The simple life that shaped her. The wealth that had searched for her. She touched the joined lockets resting against her heart. Some battles are fought with noise. Others are won with silence. She realized that her greatest strength had never been her title or her bloodline. It was her choice to stay kind when the world felt cold, as the winter sun dipped below the hospital windows, casting gold light across polished floors. Margaret whispered something that would stay with Elena forever. We did not need a rich daughter. Asterisk. We needed a good one. Elena smiled softly, because in the end, the test was never about money. It was about mercy, and mercy had won. If this story moved you, share where you are watching from and what you believe. Defines true strength. Stories like this remind us that real power is quiet, real honor is steady, and the strongest hearts often beat behind the simplest uniforms. Subscribe for more stories that honor silent courage and the unseen heroes walking among us every day.